Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Thursday, September 29th, 2022. And our top story today, cybersecurity, how to make businesses more secure. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Akshay Joshi is with the World Economic Forum. Akshay, so good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today.
And we're talking really, the basis of our conversation is around a blog post that you wrote for the World Economic Forum. And I want to ask you, this is kind of a softball, but I think it's a high-level question. How important is cybersecurity first to businesses? I got to think this is like right up there at the top beyond profit and loss. But I want to get your perspective on this.
100%. So if you think about cybersecurity, issues of cybersecurity and data theft have ranked consistently very high in the forum's global risk report that we publish on an annual basis. And that gives you a sense of, I think the importance of this particular topic in the minds of business leaders as a whole. I'd also say that, cybersecurity has typically been a technology problem, and therefore getting leaders' attention to cybersecurity issues, there's a natural barrier of sorts, right? I think we gravitate more towards financial issues, HR issues, marketing-related issues, or, things that are more in the general management realm. But cybersecurity tends to be perceived as a technology issue. And we believe that cybersecurity is more of a business issue, especially as we think about more and more businesses, going digital. So just to wrap it up from my side, cybersecurity needs to be a key consideration for any and every business leader in today's increasingly digital world.
Yeah, I completely agree, at least from a layperson's perspective. Let me ask you about individual safety and privacy because, and we're going to get more into this, but you talked about the business, but businesses really have individuals working for them. How important is individual privacy as part of cybersecurity?
So, it's often spoken about in terms of a culture of cybersecurity when we think about organizations as a whole, right? So if you break down cybersecurity, it's, you can call it technology, people, and process, right? People arguably are the weakest link in the chain. If we think about the current workforce, it's an increasing number that grew up with technology, but still the vast majority, especially at senior levels in organizations, are not digital natives. And therefore, there is definitely a learning curve, as it may be, when it comes to technology in general, but more so when it comes to some of the cybersecurity related elements. So for any effective cybersecurity strategy, as we see it within an organizational construct, trying to bring your entire workforce on board some of the cybersecurity best practices is really, really critical. And of course, we're seeing the manifestation into our private lives as well, right? So if you think about identity theft and others, it's really important that we are following good practices when it comes to cyber hygiene. If I was to draw an analogy, right? We look at dental hygiene. All of us know what are some of the good practices. We need to go to a dentist once a year. We need to go to a hygienist, say, every 6 months or so. We just know that it's good for us, right? How about extending it into the realm where we are thinking about, I need to keep changing my passwords every now and then. Guess what? I probably need multi-factor authentication such that, I'm not just reliant on a username and a password and have multiple mechanisms to verify my identity as I'm on a platform. So just these simple notions can have a pretty significant impact on individual cybersecurity posture and by extension, the cybersecurity posture of the organization.
Yeah, and I like that you kind of equate it to dental hygiene. And don't forget the floss, everyone, in addition to changing your password. Let me ask you about the prevalence of cybersecurity breaches today. We all read the news, we all check out the TV and the media, and we hear about breaches. How prevalent are breaches at large and small businesses today?
So, the reality is that less than 25% of cyber attacks are reported. And therefore, the extent of the problem is at best a guesstimate. Let's all agree that it's pretty prevalent, and we're seeing a lot of large attacks. If you take some examples, last year, the Colonial Pipeline attack was one that was spoken about extensively, and we saw that, how it paralyzed at least the east coast of the US for about 3 to 4 days. Similar attacks have been seen across the board, and the element is that, we are seeing cyber attacks that are potentially having an impact on lives as we lead them. So it's not just business disruption, it is really having a significant bearing on our lives as a whole. And therefore, I think this is an issue that needs urgent attention.
Yeah, and what does that translate to in terms of lost productivity? I often think about if your system is down, for example, and you have to restore from a backup that may be offsite in the cloud somewhere, that has a disruption to productivity. That means you can't produce whatever it is you produce or provide a service, take phone calls. And I'm thinking specifically in the financial services world, but it's every business. What is the cost in terms of that lost productivity?
I think putting a number is, so I was reading a statistic that said that the average cost of an attack is $234,000 for an organization. Obviously, I think this is a crude number, which can be different for different organizations. But just if we think about the extent of the problem, it's pretty huge. When it comes to let me take an example. If there is a cyber attack, a lot of us have our directories installed by the organization as a whole. What if there is a shutdown of the organization? All of a sudden, our phones would not have any information available about who to call. So that in itself can be a huge indicator of the amount of disruption it can cause to business continuity as a whole. And therefore, increasingly we are finding that the conversation is shifting from protection to more of cyber resilience, and cyber resilience being the ability of an organization not just to identify and protect against attacks, but also respond and recover effectively to them.
Last question for this segment, then we'll go to a quick commercial break. I want to ask you about board and C-suite priorities. These individuals that run companies, large and small, have a lot on their plate, right? Obviously they're working on the health of the business. We just came through the COVID pandemic, which had an impact in so many ways to businesses and to individuals. Where does cybersecurity sit as a priority? Because we know boards and C-suites are also focusing on things like ESG, sustainability, governance, etc. So where does this kind of sit? Is it a priority?
So I think there's no simple answer to this question. So should it be a priority? Absolutely. Is it a priority across the board? I don't think so. I think we've made remarkable progress over the past 4 to 5 years in terms of cybersecurity featuring as a recurring agenda on the board's list of priorities. So that's really good. Typically, we find that within the risk or audit committees is where you tend to deal with cybersecurity matters the most. But when it comes to cybersecurity competence and understanding of the issue at a board level, I think there is still some distance to be covered. I think some boards are doing a phenomenal job at it, whereas for others, I think there's a bit more that needs to be done here.
Yeah, and that's where an organization like the World Economic Forum, I think, really comes into play. Akshay, I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the cybersecurity vulnerabilities between large and small businesses. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? They are the lifeblood of the American economy. featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking this morning to Akshay Joshi of the World Economic Forum. Well, Akshay, thanks so much for staying with us this morning. Really appreciate you staying on the program to talk more about cybersecurity.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
All right, as I said, as our lead into the commercial break, let's talk about vulnerabilities. And I have to imagine that vulnerabilities may be different for large businesses, large organizations, and small businesses, smaller organizations. What's your perspective?
So, my perspective is a bit simpler. I just take one view of the world. Cybersecurity is an issue that affects any and every organization, irrespective of your size. As long as you're sort of connected to the internet, these vulnerabilities are floating around networks and you can be a target. The reason I say that is that you don't necessarily need to be a target in today's interconnected world to really be facing the consequences. A lot of targets are essentially collateral damage as well. And therefore, I think our best chance is to beef up our defenses to the extent possible to stay ahead of this threat.
Yeah, and let's talk about what small and large businesses can do. And you already talked in the first segment about good hygiene. And I would imagine part of that is education, because you're only as strong, you can have the best infrastructure in place, but you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that may be your employees in some respects.
So I think there are a lot of things that can be done. And of course, I think a lot of these things can be budget intensive, but they don't necessarily need to be. For example, instilling a culture of cybersecurity is something that you can do with training and awareness, which need not be very intensive when it comes to costs. You can probably get technology solutions like firewalls or antivirus that are effective at a minimum level too. And more importantly, there is also the possibility of, using simple things, for example, good password hygiene, looking at things such as multi-factor authentication, that can go a big way. Oftentimes we find that, passwords that are not used very judiciously lead to identity theft of sorts, or provide a way for attackers to find an entry point into the organization's network. So if we just focus a bit on the basics, we can really have a sea change there. I'd also like to emphasize that the business leaders play a pivotal role. If you make cybersecurity a strategic business decision, right? I think a lot depends on that. So, for example, before you're buying that new solution, I think that CRM software, are you really thinking about, how cyber secure is this particular product, right? So I think some of these decisions need to be hardwired into the organization's DNA, that think about security of products and solutions that you're bringing into your environment. And more importantly, whenever you make a business decision, think about, whether cybersecurity, how cybersecurity is being addressed within that particular business decision per se.
Let's end the segment with talking about creating a culture of prevention, of cybersecurity prevention and awareness. How do you do this? I mean, in the day-to-day work that businesses are performing, they're either providing a good, a service, or both. So there's a lot of focus on delivery. But how do you create that culture of cybersecurity prevention?
So, I'm probably going to be a bit pessimistic over here and then say that there is no such thing as prevention, because in order to defend an organization, the good guys, or essentially the organization, needs to be on point 100% of the time, whereas an attacker needs only that one instance to be able to make it into the organization, right? So there is no such thing as 100% cyber protection in today's world, in my view. Having said that, I think focusing on some of the elements of cyber resilience and how do we make sure that we are preparing for cyber attacks in a way that, we are mapping out the threats. We are looking at what are the assets that are most critical to our business that need to be secured the most. So it's really like a business problem, right? I mean, what are the things that you hold most dearly? They need to be the ones that have the highest degree of protection. And then, you go with that. Similarly, if there were to be an event, how do we recover from that? I'm just going to take an example from my previous background. And I used to navigate ships for the longest time, right? So for almost about 10 years, I did that. So as a navigating officer on board ships, we used to have what they call an electronic chart display system. So these were like the new machines, electronic charts that came into the mix. But we used to have a paper folio of charts as well, right? And as a navigating officer, I was responsible for maintaining both. So while for the most part, we would be referring to our navigation on the electronic display, we were still mapping our position on paper charts. And, in the event that the electronic version was to fail, we have a fail-safe version in the paper chart format, right? So what I'm trying to get at with that is that, in systems and organizations, irrespective of size, there is this possibility to build in resilience by design.
Yeah. Well, I think what you've really underscored is the interconnectivity. No person is an island unto themselves. There's an impact to everyone if there's a cybersecurity breach, and therefore we're really all in it together. Akshay, we're going to have to leave it there. Great speaking with you. Thanks so much. And we look forward to having you and the World Economic Forum back on the program again very soon.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, and all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content? Well, visit our website and, of course, our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN AM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.